What's up, YouTube? It's the Action Figure Grader coming back to you with another market update for vintage Kenner mint on card items. I've got a couple of vehicles here, but mainly mint on card, graded and ungraded, and the conditions all over the place. Everything from nice display pieces that are not really gradable all the way through to some very high grade items that sold for some big money. Let's go ahead and take a closer look. And we're not going to kind of go in order of like 12 backs all the way the power of force. It's really kind of organized by different sellers. So LJ's Card Shop had more hot items for sale. This seller always has beautiful stuff. And the first one we're going to start off with is a Collector Series Darth Vader TIE Fighter. This was a mint and sealed box example, graded AFA 75. Pretty beautiful box art on that one. I absolutely love that. And so it was an AFA 75, and again, it was mint and sealed box. You can see the red label AFA there. For a 75, that one sold in an auction for $666. Pretty good numbers there between Order 66 and the evil that is Darth Vader with 666. So I like that ending number there. That's a really good number for Darth Vader item. $666 plus $40 shipping. So about $700 for an AFA 75 mint and sealed box Collector Series Darth Vader TIE Fighter. So this is the later edition that came out about 1983-ish. Obviously not the early edition. So next up, this was a big item, and this seller Jaybird had a number of awesome items for sale. We're going to get back to Jaybird's kind of auctions here a little bit later on, but this was a mint in box TIE Bomber diecast. So we all know how expensive this one is. This is easily, of the diecast, the most expensive of the different ones that were released, at least on the standard US editions. But this was a beauty. And, you know, even just the die-cast TIE Bomber by itself, outside of the packaging, can sell for a lot of money, $600 to $900, sometimes over $1,000. This one was still sealed inside the blister. Obviously, the packaging wasn't perfect. It had, you know, lots of wear and things like that around the box. But very expensive item. That one sold for $2,950 on 61 bids plus $13 shipping. So big number on that one, but that's kind of what you'd expect for a die-cast TIE Bomber. On to the mint on cards. This seller had a number of items that were for sale, and none of them were in particularly great condition, but I wanted to at least show you some options out there for those of you that like to collect lower cost mint on cards. I'm not sure about this Ben Kenobi. This one looks like it's been resealed to me. If you look at this, at the seal there, it looks like the seal is either falling off or it's been resealed. So keep that in mind when you're bidding, is to really zoom in on the seal, because this one is very questionable. But I did want to at least show some of these items, because not everybody cares about grading these items. You know, slide these into it like a case shell acrylic case or GW acrylic case, and it looks great on your display wall. But this was the Ben Kenobi on a 31 back. And again, I'm pretty sure this was a reseal. That one still sold for $318. Same seller also had this clear blister Cloud Car Pilot. Again, I'm a little... I question whether some of these have not been resealed or not. They're not listed as such, but you know, it's not the kind of thing that you could grade. This one also did have writing on the racetrack there, and that's going to be the case for some of these. So, you know, I would consider these kind of just good displays, nothing that I would try to grade, because, you know, with writing on the racetracks, you're kind of precluded from sending them into grading companies. I've heard that if they have like a price tag that's been written on there, like a $10 written in ink or something, they won't ding you for that. But ink touch-ups, or, you know, ink on the racetrack, again, I'm not sure if some of these would even qualify. Not that they would grade that high anyway. But this was a 48 back offerless Cloud Car Pilot. That one sold for $155. Here was a Luke Skywalker in his Hoth battle gear on a Return of the Jedi card back. This was the 77 back A. That one sold for $223.50. Heavily yellowed, lots of dings, but again, just some lower cost items that I don't talk about that much, that I just wanted to share with you guys for those of you that are in that kind of price point, because not everyone wants to spend $500 or $1,000 on some of these vintage items. Here was a Han Solo to kind of go with the Luke Hoth. Again, pretty rough condition, unpunched, but heavy yellowing and lots of big dings on the blister. That one sold for $152.50, as you'd expect, kind of right in line. Here was the Luke Skywalker. This one also did have writing on the card, as you can see there. This is the looking photo. This was a Return of the Jedi with heavy damage on the back. So even this one, in the rough condition that it's in, with the writing on the front of the card, with the massive tear on the back of the card on this 77A Luke Bespin, it's still sold for $239. So pretty crazy how expensive those can be. This Darth Vader was probably the best condition of the lot. It did have a staple punch on the card back there. That one sold for $350. I'm going to show you some others here in a second that are also Darth Vaders that I would argue are probably better deals than these two. But you can see very clearly it's got staple holes on the left, staple holes on the right from probably where it was displayed on a wall or some kind of board. Light yellowing to the blister. The blister itself wasn't in terrible shape, and then the card, having those two staple holes along with the proof of purchase kind of scratched out. So those are all negatives, and again, examples of kind of lower end cost items. But I would argue that this one's probably a little bit of an overpay. It sold for $350 on 44 bids, and I'm going to show you some other examples here in a second for Darth Vader. Here was a Power of the Force card. Now, this one was also in rough shape for the Han Solo in Carbonite, and you can see the heavy wear to the hang tab area. It was unpunched. It did have kind of a little hole there. Back of the card was in good shape. It's just the front of the card had a lot of heavy creasing. Even though it had that heavy damage to it, it still sold for $420. So big demand for these Power of the Force Last 17 figures. Here was probably the best of the bunch in terms of condition as well as desirability, and that's the Power of the Force card for the Luke Skywalker in his Stormtrooper disguise. It did have some pretty major kind of sticker residue from where that Toys R Us price sticker was removed. One little spot there on the left-hand side, and heavy edge wear. So again, this one sold for $13.80. I would argue this is probably an overpay, but I think you could probably do better. Just keep an eye out for one that's in slightly better condition. This is probably at best, got 70 plus, maybe 75 grade condition. But, it is what it is. I mean, AFA 85s go for over $2,000 now, if not closer to $3,000 for what we've seen in some of the latest Hakes auctions. So $13.80 did take that one home on 31 bids. Here was the EV99. Looking at it, it seemed to be probably in the best condition, assuming that there was no kind of ink touch-up to it. But the back of the card looked very clean for EV99. The front of the card, moderate yellowing, light edge wear around the card. So you could make the argument that this is probably an easily a 75 grade. That one sold for $436. We've seen AFA 80s sell in that $700 to $800 range. So I think that was appropriately discounted given the light condition issues and the fact that it's not graded. Here is an AFA 85 EV99, and that one actually sold, I thought, for a great deal. This one was going back to Jaybird. It was a punched example with the ugly Toys R Us price sticker, but it was an AFA 85. Card 80, blister 85, figure 85, and $611 I think is a really good deal on that one. To me, you get this one an AFA 85 versus this one that's ungraded and wouldn't even sniff an AFA 85, and you're paying, let's call that about $170 more. This was a good deal. I think this was a better deal versus this one. Now, again, some people just don't care about grading, but to me, if you're going to spend this kind of money, spend the extra, let's call it $170, $180 after shipping, and get one that's in much better condition. And that's certainly the case with this one. He also had this one. I thought this was probably the best deal out of all the ones we're going to look at today. It was a clear blister 31 back B Hoth Rebel Soldier, unpunched, no price sticker, AFA 80, archival case, 80, 85, 85 were the sub scores. So pretty good deal on this one. And I think the 31A was the debut card technically, but you could argue that this is kind of a debut card-ish kind of figure, and it certainly was in great shape. I mean, that's a beauty. $415 on that. I thought that was a bargain. I would have paid that all day long. I guess people just don't care about the the Hoth Rebel Soldier, Hoth Rebel Commander. It seems like those are not particularly expensive, but to me, I thought that was a really good buy. Next up is the Imperial Commander, AFA 85. Straight 85s for the sub-score, archival case, unpunched, No price sticker, as good as it gets. This is case fresh, beautiful example. $523 on that one. That's a number I would pay all day long for an AFA 85. I would wager that if this was on Hakes, it would have sold for at least $100, if not $200 higher after accounting for the buyer's premium. I'm not saying that the seller would get the same amount net after all these expenses and everything, but I think from a buying perspective, if you're going to get an AFA 85, this is not a bad deal. $523 for a 41 back C, unpunched, offerless Imperial Commander. Good deal. Next up was a Lumat, same seller, and this was ungraded. This was a punched example with the Walmart price sticker. Beautiful example, though. Great shape. This is obviously a made in Mexico example, as you can see there at the bottom of the card. It's got the figures made in Mexico right down there. And then it also has that factory punch that we talk about all the time for these Lily Lettys that were made for the U.S. market. Usually they kind of punched right around that side on the back of the card back there. So that is a factory applied hole there. And that would probably score an 80. I think it's probably a low 80 if you had to ask me. There's some light edge wear to it. One little condition issue by the hang tab there, but I think it would probably sneak out an 80 grade. And 137.50, I mean, that's not a bad deal at all. It did have, the infamous kind of torso discoloration that's fairly common on these Lumats. I've got a Lumat on the Tri-Logo card, and it's got that same slight discoloration. So, if that's important to you, make sure you really zoom in on the photos, because it's very obvious on this one that the arms and the legs are not the same color as the yellowing torso on this Lumat. But still, I think that's a really good buy. $137.50. Can't beat that price at all for a mint on card. On the other end of the spectrum was this 2-1B AFA 85. This one was a 41 back D. 80, 85, 85 were the subscores, and they had an archival case. And I did have a friend of mine reach out about this before this auction closed. And he said, where is this going to sell? 900, 950? And I said, it's going to sell for that, or if not more. And it turns out it did sell for quite a bit more. It sold for $1,152. And unfortunately, that's kind of in line with 2-1B on an offerless 41 back. It's just beautiful, beautiful condition. And it's a very desirable card back, especially offerless. It seems like the 45 back with the Star Wars display arena, maybe the Revenge of the Jedi, 48 backs you see that pretty commonly for the 2-1B, but to get the offerless one in the condition that this one's in, I think that was a pretty good buy. Well, I don't know if it's a good buy, but it's a fair value, just relative to some of the ones I've seen sell at Hakes. So $11.52 on that. Now let's dig into Brian's toys. He had some kind of interesting items. This one was a very yellowed Luke Skywalker, and this is a question I get a lot. This is, hey, I'm thinking about investing in 12 backs. Are they good deals or not? Or should I invest in those? And I say, hey, look, you can do with what you want with your money, but you got to keep in mind that even inside the blister for some of these 12 backs, the figures can degrade inside the blister, and that's the case with this one. Now, in this case, it was already degraded prior to grading, right? Well, actually, no. This is I take it back. This one had not. So it was a card 60, blister 60, figure 80. Okay, so I would argue that the condition of the card back and the blister and all that was already taken into account. But whenever this one was graded, this is not an 80 grade figure, obviously. So whenever this one was graded, the 80 grade for the figure subscore does not apply anymore. So you can see that, in my opinion, this is my personal opinion. No offense to those of you that collect 12 backs or 21 backs or whatever. I've got a couple of 20 and 21 backs, but I'm not spending big money on some of these 12 backs, especially for Luke, Stormtroopers, or Princess Leia, because even inside the blister, they can degrade. And that's exactly what's happened with this one. So I saw the 60 grade overall, and I said, okay, well, it's already been graded. It was graded after it degraded. But that's not the case, because you can see very clearly it had a figure subscore of 80, and that no longer applies to this figure. So be careful with your money, okay? And if you got money to burn and you don't care if it degrades and you want to just get your enjoyment out of it for 5 or 10 years before it starts to turn like this, and you plan on keeping them in kind of sunless dungeons like most of the time my collection room's in, and you plan on keeping them temperature controlled to slow down the degrading process on some of these 12 backs, then have at it. Do whatever you want to do with your money. But I'm just trying to tell you that if you're doing it from an investment perspective, be careful. Okay. Yeah. It's a very dicey proposition to buy some of these, especially white figures, and hope that they're going to go up in value 20 years from now. I just don't see it personally. Here's a Princess Leia. This one was a 12-back A, and it was graded AFA 80. Now, and this is a case that's the opposite of the Luke that I just showed you. All right, this one was graded after the figure degraded because the card got an 80, blister 80, the figure only got a 75. And you can see why, right? So in this case, it's degrading inside the blister, but it was after, or it was before grading, right? It's got pink arms and legs, and AFA took that into account with their figure subscore of 75. Nevertheless, it's still sold for $3,000, so it's a very desirable item. It's a 12-back A Princess Leia. And, you know, again, the white figures are where you really have to worry about it. I don't think you'll see much degrading on the figures for like a Jawa or like Darth Vader, or a Han Solo. But you got to worry about with the capes on the Ben Kenobis, obviously on the vinyl cape Jawas, which we talk about, and then obviously Leia, Stormtrooper, Luke. So maybe just pick and choose which figures that you're willing to roll the dice on, and don't go crazy with like AFA 85 12-back A Leias, because chances are it's going to look like this in 20 years. So, you know, again, is it desirable? Is it awesome? Would it be awesome to have this in my collection? Sure. But it's just about whether you're willing to drop $3,000 on it or not. Here was a 12-inch AFA 50 Jawa, so kind of low grade, and the price reflected that. So it was a box 50, Windows 75, figure 85. So, you know, you had some issues there with it. But still a very nice display item, and the price of $411, I thought that was a pretty fair price for what it was. Here was the squid head that I showed in a what to buy video. And I said, hey, maybe you're lucky and you get it for sub $200. I was thinking hopefully under $150, but I think that was being very optimistic. It was a clear blister, US Kenner card, 77 back A, squid head, card 80, blister 85, figure 80. And so it was a beautiful punched example, but the blister on this one was still crystal clear, and it sold for $192.50. So kind of in line, but towards the upper end of what I would have been willing to pay. I would have paid $200 for it, but, you know, I was hoping that one of y'all could pick it up for, you know, $150 to $160, somewhere in there. All right, going back to Darth Vader, we talked about the Darth Vader that sold, that had some condition issues, that, you know, had the staples on the card, if you'll remember that one. Well, this one did not have staples on the card. You could argue that if it's a yellowed blister, it's very lightly yellowed, but it looks clear blister to me. So this was a 65 back. I think the other one was a 77 back. Now, it did have some condition issues. It wasn't perfect. It had, you know, a little spider vein there on the back of the card, but this is the 65 back A Darth Vader. Very desirable card back. And, you know, would I take that 77 back with the double staples on the front of the card and it had heavy to moderate yellowing? Or would I take this 65 back that also sold at an auction that to me looks like a clear blister without the staples? And, you know, it's a much cleaner example for about the same price. It sold for about the same price at $355. I'd take this Vader all day long. That's a really, really good deal, in my opinion. So be patient out there. Here was an AFA 85 Lily Letty made in Mexico 77 back A. I've got this one in my collection. This one sold for $718. That's a big number. But, you know, it is what it is. It's straight 85s. Obviously a clear blister since it's the Lily Letty version. The Lily Letty versions tend to stay clear because they used a different type of blister. The backs of the card backs have kind of a matte finish, which really comes through on this one. You can see how matte this one is, the matte finish on it, versus this 65 back that's much shinier, right? So you can see how much shinier this one is. And that's the Hong Kong example. So, and again, this one also has that little punch by the Return of the Jedi. So that's usually where the punch is on these offerless card backs, is right around that Return of the Jedi. And that's almost the exact same spot where my hole punch is on my Lily Letty. So anyway, this is a good data point for me, but I think mine is an 85 also. I'm not sure. I have to double check it. And I think mine is a punched example just like this one. So this gives me a good data point as to what mine is worth. And that sounds about right. You know, $718. I think I paid $600 for mine, and that was a while ago, a long time ago. So it hasn't really moved up that much in price. at the same grade. This is a pretty apples to apples comparison for mine. So don't expect big jumps in value, because I bought mine at least 3 or 4 years ago, and it's selling for pretty much the same price. So, but it was a beauty. It was an AFA 85, Lily Letty, Darth Vader, straight 85s. So beautiful example. Here was an AFA 80 plus yellowed blister, archival case, unpunched Imperial Gunner. It did have an odd lot price sticker of 99 cents. Here's the back of the card. So that punch is starting to fall out just a little bit. You know, as long as you can live with the risk that this one, where the punch won't fall out in shipping and just kind of fall to the bottom of the case. I've actually had that happen to me a couple of times on some unpunched examples. I don't particularly care, but you know, if you're into unpunched and you can only have unpunched, then just keep in mind that you run a little bit of a risk there that this punch will pop out during shipping. But that was a beauty. That was a really nice example. Fairly moderate yellowing, which is common. That one sold for $1,000 in a buy it now situation. And again, it was an 80 plus grade, 80, 85, 90 subscore for the Imperial Gunner. So that was a beauty. And then finally, this one was an interesting one. Another 65 back B like the Vader. This one was unpunched with a Sears price sticker, and it was an AFA 85. 85, 80, 85 were the subscore, but it is a clear blister. Very tough to find the clear blister for this Lando on the earlier card backs. I mean, I've got a 79 back that I think is still clear, but the 65B, Lando doesn't yellow nearly as much as some of the other characters, but that was a beauty. That was a really nice example, and it sold in an auction for $405 for that one. So this was a 65B. So really nice example there. So you can see the prices are all over the map right now, and I think the best example that I'm trying to get across are the 77 back A Vader with the staples versus the 65 back Vader that was clear blister without the staples, and they both sold for almost the exact same price. So don't get caught up in these auctions and where you got to have it. I mean, as an example, I bid on 4 different comic books last night. I lost every one of them, and I'm okay with it. I had my top line price. I was bidding on Heritage, I was bidding on Comic Link, and I lost everything, and I'm okay with it because I'm just not willing to overpay right now. Pick your number that you think is worth and put it in, and if you get outbid, then so be it. And that's kind of the way I'm rolling. I'm just going to move right along and hope for something else down the line. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you as always for watching, and I'll be back soon.